Hi friends, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I'm Dr. Ritu Khosla, Assistant Professor in the Department of Political Science, MCM DAV College for Women, Chandigarh. The topic that we are going to discuss today is issues of democracy with special reference to Asia, Africa and Latin America. Now if we talk about the democracy, it is one of the most popular form of government at the present times. The term democracy, it has been derived from the Latin words demos and kratia. Demos means people and kratia means power. Thus, democracy implies power of the people or sovereignty of the people. Now, talking about the democracy, it can be classified in two types. We have the direct democracy and the indirect democracy. The direct democracy is the one in which people directly participate in the decision-making process. Whereas over the period of time, with the increase in the population of the states, this is not possible. So at present times, the indirect form of democracy is in practice. Indirect form of democracy is one in which the people, they choose their representatives who makes the laws for them. And these representatives, they are responsible before the people. In addition, democracy, it is based upon the twin principles, or we can say the two pillars of the democracy. They are liberty and equality. Now, in a democratic form of state, various liberties or the freedoms are given to the people, like the freedom of speech and expression, freedom of movement, freedom of having the associations, freedom to criticize the government, and so on. And in addition, it is also based on the principle of equality. That is, every citizen is given equal rights. No discrimination is made on the grounds of race, color, caste, sex, or birth. So let us start with our today's study. Objectives of the study: to know the meaning of democracy, to understand the importance of democracy, to discuss the problems faced by democracy in Asian countries, to identify the issues of democracy in African countries, to know the challenges of democracy in Latin American countries, to offer suggestions for democracy to succeed in these countries. Now, talking about democracy in Asia. Democracy entered the Asian and African countries only after the Second World War. As in other instances, democracy took hesitant steps, though people of these countries were very sure about heralding in democracy in their respective countries. Among the Asian countries, in India, the urge for democracy set in motion a spate of events which united the Indians and drove out the British. In Thailand, the military regime denied their citizens rights for many decades. Amidst political conflict, the country is trying to meet its deadline of holding elections in 2016 and in the process of drafting a new constitution. But the critics point out that the dominance of the military officers and the conservative elite in the bodies that are deliberating the new constitution, little scope for reforms under the new constitution. Restrictions on freedom of speech under the martial law are not a healthy sign. Indonesia faced chaotic years in the 1960s under President Sukarno, the country's first president. President Suharto rose during this turmoil and became the second president of Indonesia for 30 years. After plunging into an authoritarian rule after Suharto, the reformation in Indonesia is helping the country limp back to democracy. Singapore is one of the richest non-democratic countries in Asia. Ruled by the People's Action Party, called PAP, it guards all the secret cards, keeping them close to its chest. The party has full control and the opposition parties are subdued by hook or crook. The plebiscite of 2016, announced by PAP, holds a glimmer of hope for its people, though many are skeptical about the plebiscite being held in the first place. China, the superpower, one of the permanent five, has its own definition of democracy. China believes that the Communist Party is the vehicle for the social change. It is the only party that can herald inequality in the country. The Communist Party gives more importance to economic rights than to social and political rights. So the people have a choice between the candidates, but not between the political parties, all the candidates, over their allegiance to the Communist Party. Bangladesh is again one country which has elected democracy a number of times. The army maintained its hold on the political system for a long time. Pakistan again is a curious mixture where democracy is finding it hard to establish itself. A Muslim country, there is infighting among the various regional sect groups, and the army's overpowering presence only complicates the scenario further. Afghanistan, a resource-rich country, is in shambles today because of the intervention of the big powers like US, USSR, etc. in the recent past. The country is in the midst of a civil war with elections taking place, but under the shadow of the United States, whose army has formidable presence. Peace eludes the nation as some tribes of Afghanistan fight amongst each other as well as against the US forces. The country is in no-win situation. Myanmar, Burma, is under the control of military generals. Aung San Suu Kyi has been struggling to restore democracy in her country. Burma, she has led the movement from the front and her movement has been non-violent. The military-backed Union Solidarity and Development Party won the 2010 elections, which was criticized for being manipulated. The charge was refuted, calculating the nation's progress on gross national happiness and not gross national product or gross domestic product. Bhutan lives peacefully as a state. With the king leading the country, the people are content for King Jigme Wangchuk welcomed participation of the people in 1998 by voluntarily curtailing absolute monarchy. He abdicated in favor of his son Jigme Khesar Wangchuk. With the new constitution, Bhutan is now a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary democracy. Nepal has witnessed turbulent times since the last century. King Brinder gave way to democratic institutions in 2008 on the demand of the people of the country. But his brother Gyanendra became the king after the former's tragic murder in 2001. King Gyanendra assumed power after his brother's death and wiped away all the democratic institutions in 2005. The people took on the streets and the king was forced to hand over the power to the seven-party alliance in 2006. With the new constitution, Nepal presently has to accept the dissent of the Madheshis or the hill people. It is trying to accommodate everybody's interest. Sri Lanka has been ravaged by war in the last century. Progress has suffered and the country saw a civil war of the worst kind. The liberation of Tamil tigers Elam fought for the rights of the Tamilians. It is only recently that peace has been restored in the country to the south of India. These are countries like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, which were part of the defunctional USSR and emerged as independent states after the collapse of USSR in 1990-91. These countries are rich in natural resources and have potential to grow. But some of these countries are facing problems because of deprivation felt by respective citizens. When the people of the country are not happy and contented, democracy cannot secure for a long time. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania are the three Baltic states that are facing turbulent times. Unrest in one corner of Asia would lead to democracy being endangered. India, South Asia's largest and most diverse country, has displayed greater resistance in terms of economic performance, democratic rule, and socio-political stability. But the other countries in the same region, such as Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Nepal, have been adversely affected by internal conflicts, leading to diverse negative outcomes. A persisting challenge for these countries is how to achieve economic development, nurture good governance, and overcome social and political conflict. It is also important to recognize the fact that South Asian countries have not evolved in isolation of each other, but have continued to be influenced by historical, socio-cultural, political, and economic forces, often speaking across geographical and national boundaries. Thus, one needs to address and face the issues of democracy, so that the people of this vast continent can enjoy the fruits of their labor while practicing their liberties and feeling equal. The issues of democracy among the Asian countries are many. Democracy has not been rooted firmly in many of the countries because of many factors. One of the biggest issues of democracy is corruption. With the dawn of independence in these countries, a small elite arose that had clung to power. This small elite in a majority of these countries, while holding on to the reins of power, has grown richer. The people of the respective countries did not notice this earlier, but the increasing corruption in the day-to-day life of the common man and the elite becoming more aloof and arrogant has made this phenomena noticeable. This elite has practiced dynasty rule and has passed on baton of power to the next generation. We have the example of Gandhi family in India. Pandit Nehru, India's first Prime Minister's daughter, Indira Gandhi, became the Prime Minister after a brief spell in which Lal Bahadur Shastri was the Prime Minister till his ultimately death at Tashkent in January 1966. After Indira Gandhi's assassination, his son Rajiv Gandhi was induced into politics. After his tragic assassination, his wife Sonia Gandhi and his son Rahul Gandhi continued to rule the roost. At the regional level, we have the examples of Badal family in Punjab, Chautalas in Haryana, Abdullahs in Jammu and Kashmir, and so on. This dynasty rule is a great challenge to democracy, for democracy means rule of the common people. This aspect of emergence of an elite class is dangerous, and this phenomena is restricted to India. In Bangladesh, in the last century, the Awami League, with its president Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, was stopped from assuming power after elections, even though they had won a majority in the 1970 elections. Since then, democracy has not been able to flourish there. In a coup, Lieutenant General Ziaur Rahman assumed the power in 1977. He was assassinated in 1981, and Lieutenant General Hossein Muhammad Irshad gained power in 1982 and ruled till December 1990. The tussle for power through elections continues between Sheikh Hasina, one of Mujib's surviving daughter, who heads the Awami League, and Khalida Zia, widow of former ruler Lieutenant General Ziaur Rahman. The military again stepped in to clean the system in 2007, but elections have been conducted since then and the Awami League won in January 2009. The ostentatious show of wealth by the elite is a trendsetter for the public to indulge in corruption. Casting one's vote is a serious responsibility. But poverty does not either let people vote nor they vote according to the dictates of money or because of the some favors bestowed on them by the ruling elite. Democracy cannot fructify till poverty is eliminated or at least mitigated. Serious efforts have to be made to eradicate poverty. This problem of poverty is not a problem of one or two countries. A majority of the Asian countries have a substantial number of people who go to bed hungry. This feeling of deprivation and exploitation does not augur well with any democracy. Another challenge of democracy in these countries is lack of social services that make the people feel neglected. Social services are necessary because they are the need of the weak, the old, and the vulnerable. Besides the social services, improving the educational level of the people is very important for democracy to be successful. And the education has to be secular in this age of migration, where an increasing number of people are moving across the continents for various purposes like education, employment, etc. In the Central Asian republics, which were once the part of dysfunctional USSR, primitive Islamic education is spreading. In the erstwhile USSR, education was of high standard because of the state's control over education. Paucity of funds has led to educational neglect. Secular education in these countries is available only with the availability of hard cash. For democracy to succeed, there is a need to stop abuse of any kinds of human rights. There is a rampant violation of human rights in many countries. This is denying justice to those whose human rights are violated. These people would lose faith in democracy as well as its institutions. This is a serious issue for the democracy. Besides this, the rights of the migration population has to be kept in mind. Democracy believes in freedom of movement, freedom of speech, occupation, and freedom that helps in the development of individuals' personality. Terrorism is another big challenge to democracy. Terrorism takes lives, it shatters dreams and breaks families. The making of one terrorist destroys a family. The terrorist further attacks at the delicate social fabric of the society by firing at many. These countries have become the training ground for terrorists. These terrorists need to be flushed out and such training grounds need to be closed. The increase in smuggling of drugs is another challenge for democracy. Drugs eat away the vitality of a nation. They corrode the youth and maim generations. The young are the future leaders, voters, administrators. Running a country falls on their shoulders. If the young are disturbed mentally as well as physically, democratic process would definitely suffer. In many of these countries, resources have to be managed, otherwise the ill-gotten wealth by a few would lead to rise of frustrations. Such situations lead to civil wars, as was the case in Sri Lanka. In these countries, caste influences people. Votes are casted on the basis of caste, as in India. Tickets are distributed according to caste. The influence of caste on the minds of people is overwhelming. This goes against the spirit of democracy. Division of people into regions is another cause for concern. Regionalism makes people narrow-minded and petty. This makes the people fight with each other. Tensions because of region, religion, or caste are great obstacles for democracy. Further, use of money and muscle power during elections goes against the ethics of democracy, yet they are used liberally. Elections are the lifeline of democracy. They reflect the mandate of people in clear terms. Yet the process is fiddled with. The interference of armed forces in this pious process is worth criticizing. Any ruling party that involves the military in the political process is not to be pardoned. Authoritarian rule by leaders in these Asian countries is one of the issues for democracy. In the past, we had examples of President Zia-ul-Haq in Pakistan, President Irshad in Bangladesh, emergency in 1975 by Mrs. Indira Gandhi. In the recent times, we have the examples of President Karimov in Uzbekistan and President Niyazov in Turkmenistan, who are running their states as police states. They are encouraging the cult of personality. Such leaders are an insult to the democratic institutions. To curb these leaders, one has no option but to encourage the participation of people in the democratic processes. The voice from the margins needs to be heard. Otherwise, separatist struggles would increase. The tribals and those in minority need to be included in the democratic process. We have to move towards establishing substantive democracy in all these countries. Substantive democracy refers to the existence of citizens as active agents capable of pursuing their interest with a measure of autonomy from the entrenched structures of dominance and privilege. Now moving towards the democracy, African countries. The African countries are rich in resources yet poor. Why? Africa stands at the crossroads today. The African countries are eager to introduce democracy in their respective societies. People want economic reforms as well as liberal democracy. Democracy, as many Africans say, is not an alien concept. Decisions in the tribes have always been taken democratically. Africa saw the first wave of democracy in the 1990s with the release of Nelson Mandela in 1990 after 27 long years in prison. South Africa led the movement towards the democracy, yet it had fluttered on the way. It is bogged down by corruption and nepotism. The infighting among the elite, especially Mandela's family for power and control, was a great discouragement for the people of South Africa. The African National Congress, that is ANC, continues to remain in power because it does not have a strong rival to pit it down. The Democratic Alliance does not appeal to the black voters, so it cannot win as it terms itself as a conservative party, and the people take it as defender of the privileges of the whites. Mali, one of the largest countries in Africa, is also one of the poorest countries. President Amadou Toumani, also known as the soldier of democracy, saved the country from military dictatorship for many years but was overthrown by a coup led by Captain Sanogo in 2012. The US trained many Malian soldiers so that the Islamic fundamentalists could not gain ground. In Kenya, democracy was there for many years, yet poll violence and rigging of votes during elections took place. This led to a lot of protests which were put down by the new constitution when it was introduced in 2010, which ensured a free and fair domestic process. Repressive laws, media censorship, ban on protest, violation of human rights have been the hallmark of Zimbabwe. Elections are full stories of intimidation by the ruling party. Congo is ravaged by the civil wars. The issues of democracy in Africa are how to manage the ethnic conflict and ethnic fragmentation. The people are divided into various ethnic groups and the fight is for hierarchy. The people don't understand the concept of equality, which is vital to democracy. The electorate is poor and illiterate and always ready for handouts. The voters are then easy to be manipulated. This is a dangerous sign of democracy. Poverty makes the people cast their vote for personal interest that is harmful for democracy. The tribal chiefs and the elites of Africa in the past ran the democracy on the patronage system. There was a close relationship between the patron and the client. The former maintained his hold over his people through the client, who received favors. In a democracy, this system broke down. The lack of trust among the people towards authority and democracy is another issue for democracy in Africa. The challenge is to build firm, strong democratic institutions. A majority of the Latin American countries have been through a turbulent past. The civil wars, the authoritarian regimes have ended, but left the weapons, guns in the hands of the ex-soldiers or with those who could afford to buy them. The people of these countries do not feel safe on the streets because these weapons can be used anywhere. Street fights are common and dangerous. People fear for their own personal safety. The military in a majority of these countries is not ready to be subservient to the civilian authorities. This is a big issue for democracy. The people want an elected government and they want the government to bring about greater social and economic equality. The basic needs of the people have to be fulfilled in order for the democracy to succeed. The governments across the countries have to see that health and educational facilities have to realize that power comes with a lot of responsibility. They have to be accountable to the people. Political parties have to play a more positive role. They have to participate, keeping aside their vested interests. The aim should be development of the country and not for a particular group or a fraction. Media has to be freed from the clutches of business houses or regimes. The journalists have to report impartially without thinking about increasing the readership or ratings of the newspapers or channel. Okay friends, let us conclude now what we have studied till now. Now if we talk about the problems that the countries of Asia, Africa and Latin America has been facing, they are quite similar in nature, like the issues of poverty, unemployment, inflation, the authoritarian rule of the leaders, or we talk about the curtailing of the rights and the liberty of the people. So all these issues, they have become a threat to the democratic institutions in these countries and these needs to be addressed. For this, people need to be more vigilant, media needs to be more mature, the socio-economic rights of the people needs to be preserved, and more important, it should be based on the principle of decentralization of powers. That is, the powers, they should not be concentrated in one hand. So if we have the three organs of the government, legislature, executive and judiciary, all the three organs, they should be performing their respective functions, because if the powers, they are vested in one hand, it will lead to more despotic or authoritarian form of government. In addition, there should be the principle of free and fair elections. There should be the freedom of speech and expression, the right to criticize the government and so on. So if all these things are kept in mind and all the issues are addressed, only then the democracy can be strengthened in these countries. Thank you.